everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today on this day, I'm so happy, so excited, so pleased I get to continue my series spotlighting the phenomenal, amazing, exceptional men of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Today, I have with me a gentleman by the name of Kevin Kimble. He is a member of the Gary, Indiana Alumni Chapter, and we will be speaking to him shortly. But first and foremost, as I always do, sir, I take a quick moment to pause. Say thank you to you for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we can't get it back. So I truly, truly appreciate you setting aside this time in your day to sit down and chat with me. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
Pleasure and a privilege to be with you this morning. It's kind of chilly here, but that's why I had to put on my sweater. But again, it's a pleasure. It's
in June. It's chilly.
Chilly, 55 degrees and raining. The audacity, right?
Oh my goodness gracious! I have never understood us Black folks who like that cold weather, but that y'all are a special breed.
It's a passing phase. It'll probably be gone by this afternoon, but it's still chilly.
Okay, all righty. So like I said, you are a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Please tell us, how long have you been a member?
Fall 18. Fall 18. Okay. Fall 18, yeah.
And where'd you pledge at?
Gary Alumni Chapter.
Okay.
The brothers here in this city made me.
Made you?
Made you.
How did that come about?
Well, affiliations and associations with many members. I mean, a lot of the members here in the city have been lifelong friends of mine for a long time. We'd done quite a few things on a nonprofit area.
Okay.
And so things of that nature manifested, and it kept seeing the same good brothers that I've known all my life. Awesome. And it was a very easy commitment for me to make. And fortunately, they were accepting of me. And I'm happy to be a part of the strong wheel that is Kappa Alpha Psi, small spoke that I am.
In a bigger wheel also.
Much bigger wheel, yes, indeed.
Well, I want to let the audience know that Mr. Kimble has been so gracious to let me pick his brain about something that I have seen parlay itself in the Black communities across the United States. And it is this instance of what happens to the Black community when these factories leave our towns. And he's in Gary, and I was born, my hometown is Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And my grandfather up there, he worked at the R.J. Reynolds tobacco factory. Mm-hmm. No education, no skill set, walked into the factory, got a good paying job that allowed for him to buy a house for his family, a good retirement, put his kids through college, even get him a Cadillac for the driveway. Sure. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, absolutely.
But I think right around the time my grandfather retired, that's when the factories started to leave Winston-Salem, and I saw the outfall from that. And the same thing kind of happened in Gary. And as I was mentioning when we came on, the last time I was in Gary was about 14 years ago. And I remember, as I was driving around, did aliens come and like suck up all the people and close down all the, I mean, it was a whole different vibe in Gary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because you've lived the experience, kind of run us through what happened, how it transpired, what happened with this whole factory shutting down in Gary.
Well, to do it justice, the factory shutting down was, a manifestation of the time, and it was a long, slow shutdown, if you will. It probably took 20 years to bottom out through. Okay. But me, I'm born and raised here. Went through school here through the 70s. Okay. And to me, it was a Mecca. It was the Mecca, one of the original Black Meccas of a city. Everywhere you looked, there was a brown excellence around you. Principals, pastors, lawyers, doctors, everyone, every community was brown in a very, very authentically real way. And to that degree, it's particularly for me and my movements. The teachers were very strong advocates of W.E. Du Bois and the talented 10th, and still what we could do and all the things that we they're planning on us to do, and they prepared us with passion. That is the Gary that I know, and many of the people that are here and left here still have that embedded in their head. So you'll see many people in many different parts of the country that are from Gary, Indiana, And to a person, they will say, yeah, Gary is not the same as what it was, but Gary is truly the people and not necessarily the place. And they hold the memory of what it did and what it put into them.
Okay.
Eternal. From that standpoint, though, Gary is a city, one of the great location points of the Great Migration. Quite a few folks, obviously, from the South migrated here in the Northwest Indiana and Chicagoland area, and many of them did work in steel mills, and that created a robust middle class, probably from the late 50s through the early 70s, for sure. And you're right. People could literally go through high school or right before high school and go straight into a well-paying, and when I say well-paying, enough to take care of a middle-class family and with extras. And that was the growth of Gary. Gary was at its best, probably maybe 150,000 strong. It was the second largest city in the state of Indiana around that time. With all the trappings as such, from entertainment to shopping and everything else. So that is the city that I grew up in, to a lesser extent as you kind of go toward the 80s. It was starting to happen.
Okay.
Because Mayor Hatcher was elected right in those 70s, 80s area. But yeah, the factories started to close right around the 80s. Well, not the factories, but the steel mills start to close and start to furlough. And it was kind of, it wasn't a decline completely. It was like a ebb and a flow. It was almost it felt from the outside looking in. And I'm the son of a steel worker.
Okay.
I remember the vacillations of my father working and then sometime being furloughed and working and furloughed. And so the thing about it was, when you're furloughed, you're not gone, right? You just kind of paused to some degree. And when you pause, it's not as definitive as you're fired or you no longer have a job, because if you have no longer have a job, you're going to go somewhere. Gotcha. So it left these folks in limbo for a decade where, well, maybe we should still be. But eventually some of those became permanent. And then ultimately they started taking, packages to retire early. And to that degree, it created what is arguably even now a very, very robust senior class with fixed income from the steel mill, right? But with a fixed income, there's a lot of pressure on the city to keep things low as possible, legislatively, low as possible.
Like property taxes and stuff?
Yeah, all of those things. Yeah, because those kinds of mechanisms have been put in place for years. They've just been kind of taken up a notch in the last probably 5 years. But yeah, it was this big pressure from those steel mill jobs ebbing and ending, and what leaves a senior tax base that has its limitations. Obviously, you can't really build up. But beyond that, the city of Gary, even if we wanted to, there's always this tension with downstate legislation. Because, suffice to say, when you have a great brown or minority metropolis, there's not a lot of folks that are not brown that are rooting for your inevitable success. And with a couple of what we call momentous occasions, like the election of Mayor Hatcher, exceptional for the community, but to the disdain of many politicians, because he was part of the civil rights movement and things of that nature. And with that, there were business machinations to potentially plot sort of the disinvestment of the city. And that disinvestment was long and slow, some intentional and some inevitable, because if there's not the same traffic flow, any business is going to make a business decision and vacate. But what you saw, sister, is 14 years ago, probably the results of an incredibly large city with an incredibly large footprint, pretty much sucked of its resource. And now a city still needing to maintain resources in all these vacant areas, because, we have a, power, our utility company still, it's NIPSCO, NIPSCO still has to be paid. Those lights need to come on for the safety of things, right?
Yeah.
So you have to support all these areas, but can't do it effectively. You have a police force that's overstressed, a fire force that's overstressed with not a lot of tax base. And that's kind of the things that it's a lot of things, kind of a confluence of things that kind of create the situation, which is probably no different from a lot of other post-industrial cities. Would arguably, just to a lesser degree maybe of what their base was at the time. We were minority based in terms of the people. Some of the other cities it's probably more of a pure business thing.
Gotcha.
And kind of hollows it out. So that's kind of how we got into the situation that we were in. And I say were because things are changing.
Gary's making a comeback.
Gary is his people, right? And it's people I kind of feel sorry. The plight of Black people here and anywhere is, if anything, we are extremely resilient.
Yes, indeed.
We're extremely resilient, and obstacles are not first nature; they're second nature. We know them. We know them well, and success is just sweeter for us when we achieve beyond these obstacles, whether intentional or just circumstance. And so the people have always had a plan. The people always believed in Gary's possibilities, and those possibilities are becoming more and more clear, arguably to the extent of some of our neighbors and some of the machinations happen in Illinois. Some of them are purely economic that make sense for other people that are moving into the area. But some of the things, the good work that some folks have done downstate to improve overall conditions for folks to come here. So it is changing, and it's changed for the better. And I think it's probably set to finally meet its true potential within the next decade.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that's great. Now, I want to ask you, as it's transition, one of the things that I have noticed, especially in my hometown in Winston-Salem, but in other Black communities, when these factories leave, these good paying jobs that require minimal education, what I saw as replacements is fast food jobs or big box jobs, that were available for the Black community to have, that don't necessarily give you an income to sustain a mortgage payment or whatever.
Sure.
So when the jobs left Garrett, the steel jobs left Garrett, what was popping up?
In terms of jobs that replaced?
Yes. What was available?
No, actually, it wasn't jobs that were replacing, because if jobs replaced those steel jobs, we wouldn't have won. It would not have been the precipitous decline that you see and most people know, because there would have been replacement income, would have been apples to apples. But so in a lot of those instances, that's where I speak to individuals took those forced retirements. In their 50s, or early 50s and late 50s. Nobody thought about the retirement and how long my savings would last, and they're just this huge check coming to them, and we'll figure it out. Well, and many of those ladies and gentlemen that took those retirement checks, they took them. It allowed them to sustain for a bit, and they arguably start taking other little jobs. Some of them with municipalities, as in the police department or sheriffs, or part-time this or part-time that, because they are kind of retirees, if you will. So they took what they could, but obviously there was no apples to apples replacement for the jobs that got them where they were. Right. And so that was truly the dilemma. That was the dilemma. And when it comes to young people, seeing that of their parents, seeing the prosperity that they saw originally, and then seeing those opportunities close, parents and others were kind of telling them, you do what you need to do. You go and find the job that you need, wherever that may be, with the possibility of, if it's possible, we'd love for you to come back. And folks from Gary, certainly of my era, heard that. If you go anywhere, go be successful. If you can, make an impact back here in your city if you can.
Okay.
whenever that is.
Whenever that is. Now, Gary's interesting because it's like you mentioned, it's predominantly Black. And I noticed like in Winston-Salem, Detroit, or what, and in Los Angeles, we have this issue of gentrification. Did that hit Gary or no?
In the truest sense, it would say yes and no. Gentrification, if I'm going to call it that, it started to happen in the last 8 years.
Okay.
And I won't call it true gentrification because it didn't necessarily price people out. It filled voids. It literally was good for the city to some degree, for that new influx of folks to come in.
Okay.
So I wouldn't call it gentrification. I think it was much more natural and less disruptive economically, because you're looking at a person that had $100,000 house here and $150,000 house next door, and a house in the middle is vacant, and then the house next to them that's vacant. So when someone buys the house, that doesn't price them out. It more steadies their value.
Gotcha.
And we've seen much more of that. But now, because of the increase, the constant increase over the last 5 years for sure, home values, because they've been really focused in about 2 or 3 areas of the city, very in a focused way, it's lifted all buoys in terms of overall property values. Okay. So we haven't seen a traditional gentrification in that way. It's really just a resetting, if you will, of property values as they should have been.
Okay. So if I was to revisit Gary today, I wouldn't see all those abandoned houses and buildings like I did 14 years ago. Is that what
you 100% would not see nearly as many, because there has been an incredible push as one of the core elements to get rid of the blight, tear down whole blocks if necessary, if they're blighted or burned or anything. And that is a noticeable change in general. Now, is there a house or a block or somewhere that's not touched yet? No, because these things take years. Yes. But we're well into the years of getting rid of a lot of the obvious and constant blight, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Now, usually what happens in our city governments, state governments, even federal governments, is they have a behind the ball knee-jerk reaction. Oh, we have a problem. Okay, now let's try to fix it. So have there been over the years initiatives, programs that have come about in Gary to assist with the revitalization so that jobs can come, people can get businesses revamped or whatever? Has there been programs?
Yes. Yes. And I will say, it's not a matter of if they came. It was a matter of how durable they were, how long they were. Because again, one of the biggest problems when it comes to any city that is lacking is capital financing and banking and banking relationships that are truly authentic, that will give new business owners or current business owners broader lines of credit. I just talked about this to a frat brother of mine just last night about lines of credit and the lack thereof of extending them and things of that nature. But those things like that have always been impediments. But again, over the last decade or so, there has been more and more efforts for banks to partner with the city of Gary to provide those types of resources. Now, that said, it does not mean that they were all easy to get, because the problem with banks sometimes is the administrative elements sometimes create such a hurdle, such a task for certainly a new business owner to provide all these documents, only to turn around and say, oh, we need one more. By the time all this has happened, the opportunity is gone, or they don't have the resource. They can't really do it anyway. So it's not timely enough. So it's not the problem they were presented, but the ones that were presented weren't in line with the resources that were available, some of the business owners, and they didn't turn out to be as good of partnerships as they wanted. Now, there are others that I think a lot of cities have used, like I can't remember, all of them don't have, you know, the same names, but you know, the pilots where you can buy the lot next to you for $1 if you take care of it and things of that nature. You buy the house program, and that's happened around the country, and Gary was no different. That was successful again because you're mating responsible property owners with a property adjacent to them in one way or the other for their upkeep, and that obviously lifts again the boats of that neighborhood, and that neighborhood lifts the boat of that area, et cetera. So those things have been very successful. The business relationships, just, you know, they come and go. Some of them have been good. Some of them have not been as good. And it wasn't for not trying. It's just, again, sometimes it wasn't the correct meshing.
Okay.
And by some point, everybody is meeting, you know, a profit margin. Is this an equitable relationship we're entering? Is it making us money based on the amount of loans in those last 4 years? Maybe not. Gotcha. Let's stop it. So it's not for lack of effort, though.
Okay. So in 2023, what are the good paying jobs for a brother in Gary?
The good paying, I mean, Gary is kind of, I wouldn't say Gary has an industry that is its trademark anymore. It's not a steel town of old. Okay. Steel jobs still exist, but there are jobs in logistics, trains. Okay. You know, a lot of trains, because one thing folks don't know about Gary is it's what is called an intermodal. It's one of the heaviest trafficked areas, and it's accessible by boat. I mean, we have a harbor, we have a port, we have an airport, an international airport. We have a highway, the heaviest traffic highway system through the central corridor of the United States. Okay. And so it's an intermodal. So trucking and anything relative to logistics is an opportunity for folks here. Working at the port, working at the airport, working for obviously a steel company, but it's a lot of other and adjacent companies that support those businesses that are also available. Okay. And to that degree, not Gary is after that, everybody is after those jobs. Mm-hmm. So anyone moving to Northwest Indiana is after those kinds of jobs because they do pay very well.
Do they require education?
Yes, some of them absolutely do. Some of them don't. It requires experience. And that is where we find ourselves lacking because, you know, I think as a city, we're late to open our minds beyond the one track of a college education is the be all to end all to your highest aspirations. We have failed to give consistent and long-term messaging on the power of trades, the power of certifications, and because those certifications and some of those trades will get you jobs that are equal or better than some of the ones that cost, you know, $200,000 going to a college. Mm-hmm. And I think we're starting to do that a lot more, as many other cities again. Okay. But in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, those messages have started to come out, but now they're coming out with much more resonance and as much more of a viable option. Okay. Because if someone thinks about it, you ask a young sister or young brother to consider their next steps as they, you know, as they think of a career. It's much easier for them to think about, you know, a certification that costs $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 than a college education that could cost them $200,000 or $100,000, whatever that may be. It's just a matter of economics and them making better decisions and us being great mentors of their next steps professionally and giving them those pathways.
Yeah, you know, it is a dichotomy, so to speak, you know, because my grandfather's generation, they were very much the tradesmen, you know, very much so, HVAC, automotive and all of that stuff, but they pushed go to higher education, go to college.
100%. Don't do what I'm doing. Yes,
you know, but now we do have to be more open to the shift because the reality is, although the ones that came before us, they wanted us to pursue the higher education. Not everybody's going to go to college. It's just not for everybody. It's not a pathway.
It never has been truly, but yeah.
And they pay, a plumber pays just as well.
Yeah, it's just, again, we tend to glorify or lift up inequitably things that shouldn't necessarily be placed against one another.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic lawyer and a fantastic doctor is a fantastic person that has achieved a great deal.
Yeah.
To the same degree, a fantastic plumber and a fantastic masonry person or person that's a general contractor is arguably doing as well as some of those individuals.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't always say, go be a plumber, go be a contractor, because, you know, we haven't traditionally put those names out there as the best. It's something you fall into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's, you know, shame on us
for
not, again, nurturing and mentoring all pathways based on your passion and not because of what someone perceives something to be.
True. And like you mentioned, I think we are, reframing the mindset today in 2023 that trades are, a very viable solution, an avenue for you, especially when it comes to raising your family. My grandfather, and I don't know, I guess it's still today, but especially in my grandfather's generation,
yeah,
the messaging was a man is supposed to provide. A man is supposed to provide. You're supposed to be a provider. It's still here today, but that was heavy on my grandfather. And I think when you don't present all of the options to a brother, he kind of like, okay, well, let me double dutch in here. Where do I go? But to provide these opportunities from the community, I think is a wonderful thing. I lost my track there. Because I was thinking of something. I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
In your opinion, and this is because we're talking about this now. In your opinion, what do you think is more of a threat to society? An educated Black man who's in a middle class or high earning job that's taking care of his family, or a Black man who is in a gang committing crimes? Which one do you think society perceives to be more of a threat?
Wait a minute. Let me make sure I understand. You say which one of those groups is more of a threat? The educated?
Yeah, the educated Black man who's taking care of his family, or
the young man in a gang?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's suffice to say society is going to say the gang member is more of the threat, but that's society. Mm-hmm. Here's what I know. Life is interesting. And there's a lot of individuals that I'm so happy right now to see them living their best life, and they have overcome incredible elements. Literally, folks that dropped out of school,
yes,
that were doing drugs, they were just on a wrong path for 5, 6, 7 years, mm-hmm. that found their lane and have flourished. The best of whatever you want to call it, photography, and as business owners, but they, again, as I began this conversation, it's about what our ability to be resilient and achieve under pressure with adversity. This is what we do. Mm-hmm. Our greatest days aren't always today.
Yes.
But with pushing and with a constant resolve of finding where your niche is, it is inevitable. And the fact of the matter is, to the young men and women that find themselves on the wrong path, to make no mistake, and I'll throw it from Gary to Chicago, young men and women that find themselves in gangs didn't wake up and say, I want to be in the gang. What they found out is, I want to go to what they woke up and did at 10 years old is, I want to go to the candy store. Mm-hmm. And in order to get to the candy store, I have to go 4 or 5 blocks. And in order to go 4 or 5 blocks, I got to go through a couple of thresholds that I'm pushed, somebody's trying to take my money, somebody's trying to tell me this, somebody is trying to get me to do that, all types of temptations, all of which are eliminated with this offering of, well, you ain't part of the fill in the blank. And all of a sudden the proposition of gang isn't about being in part of illicit activity per se. It's about really just protecting themselves in their neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That literally is it for a great deal of individuals. Now, obviously, once they're in, they start doing nefarious activity, which is what we pick up and we see, which is obviously terrible. But my point is, the innocence doesn't begin with, I want to be in that. It's, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
This is my environment.
I can't even sit on my porch. Now in Gary, it was never truly as bad as in other cities to that degree, but it's still gangs, plenty of gangs, always have been gangs. There's areas everywhere that has that.
Yes.
But it's just sweeter seeing those folks that were off track winning.
Yes.
Now, the key that connects those is, as you've heard, you're kind of a product of your circle. You encircle yourself with folks that are about achieving or doing things. And I don't mean achieving necessarily the best education, but just achieving, winning or trying to grow something or do something positive. That will be a part of your DNA. If those folks happen to be ethical and moral, you will do it the right way. You'll become a moral and ethical leader, right? So I think it just takes time. It takes a longer time for many individuals to find that circle. Some folks find it in their teens, and it matriculates into a college education, and kind of they move from there. Some folks find it in their 30s after having done quite a bit wrong. Key is just to find it. And we have to be a bigger voice in giving them grace where they are, and pointing them in the right direction, or mentoring them in the right direction, or finding that circle for them.
True.
Because we don't have lost souls in the Black community.
No, not at all. And, you know, I originally asked the question because sometimes in our conversations that we have at the cookouts, you know, there's a toss up with the dilemma of producing more educated Black men, because the reality is we can get you guys in college, but to get you guys to complete college is sometimes the battle.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it just seems like there's so many barriers pushing back in society to kind of get you guys, you know, to cross the stage with that piece of paper. And it almost gives this feeling like the world is against you and doesn't want you to achieve these things. So that's why the dilemma is, does society really want to see brothers out there flourishing with a piece of paper, raising their families, buying homes or whatever, or would they rather see you guys out there bang, bang, shoot them up, causing all of this chaos in your communities and stuff like that? So it was just kind of like, you know, when we have these conversations, yeah, it sounds nice, you know, we have a nice little conversation, but is that really what you want to see?
Yeah, very interesting, sister. Yeah, you're right. There, like I said, as I spoke about Gary, there are folks that did not love, despite us flourishing at a point in time, did not love the notion of brown people doing well. Ask folks from, you know, many of the historically brown cities that flourished, that got burned to the ground, Rosewood, etc. So it's a tradition of success in the broader culture not necessarily being accepted or just loved. So to that degree, we can't expect our motivation to be how society will or will not lift us up on our best day. We have to be of the task of achieving through those things, probably with those setbacks and stumbling blocks as our motivation to keep going. This is them trying to stop me. I won't be stopped. But but we should never make the excuse of society they're blessing or not blessing me as the reason I'm not going to walk across that stage if that's what I want. I think, though, in many of the instances, if you will, a lot of folks that don't graduate, it's not about necessarily that they didn't want to graduate. I think what we probably have to do a lot more is press individuals, young people, especially, to what is your passion? What do you really love to do? Do you love being outdoors? Okay, noted. Do you love playing in the flowers? Okay, noted. Do you love looking up at the sky and the clouds? My daughter loves looking at the clouds and sky. Now, I was wondering if she wanted to be a meteorologist. Would you want to study? But my point is, you got to connect those things to what you can do with that. If you start doing that, as opposed to saying, you need to stop playing these games and study to be a lawyer, this is a disconnection. I'm just doing it because my uncle said, or my mother said it, or my grandmother said that's what is good. Well, there's aptitudes to being a great lawyer. Do you like to speak in front of folks? Do you have an aptitude to read in a volume of material and understand and appreciate it's you know, you have to connect those dots. And again, we have to mentor better our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors' children, etc. To that, what do you love to do? And when you love to do a thing, or you think you love something, and you see a life doing that, even if it's in a small adjacency, you find a person that's naturally motivated because they see the connection.
Yeah, that's I think a bridge that we are having within the generations, because as I mentioned earlier, with my grandparents, it was just, you get a good job because you got to take care of care. We're in the struggle, and we're trying to get out of the struggle. But today, we are in a time where I want to find something to do for the rest of my life that I'm passionate about. So there's this segue between generations where, you know, the older folks are looking at us like, what you mean you want to be happy going to work? Yeah.
They can't relate. They cannot relate. Right. I want to love what I'm doing. I'm there 8, 9 hours. Can I love it? Can I like it a little bit?
What you mean you got to feed them kids? What you talking about?
Yeah.
That ain't gonna pay the house, no.
Right. I mean, and that is a very true message. It is not wrong. It never has been wrong. Mm-hmm. But if one is a little bit more introspective and think about it a little bit more, there's a way to go out there and feed that family while thinking about what it is you love to do, and trying to, even if you got to go and work in a restaurant, you know, is that restaurant next to thing I like? You know, is it next to the gardening shop, which is my thing? I love plants. I just don't know if you can make money working with plants.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
So you have to find the thing. You got to find the rose in the concrete. Mm-hmm. So you just have to find it. Yeah. And once you do, it becomes that thing. But I wish I'd learned a trade early. My only foray into a trade was in between jobs. I won't even say what the jobs were, but I was working in St. Louis, and I just told someone this recently, I lost the job, or the contract ended on that job. And there was a tornado, a huge swath of tornadoes in St. Louis in the summer. And a cousin that I knew, but I didn't know him incredibly well, took me in because my granddad asked him. Beyond that, we became the best of cousins for that. Obviously gratitude, but I learned to both tuck point and get on top of roofs to do a little bit of roofing. But more importantly, I got a chance to break bread with my cousins who were born in that business of construction and masonry, and they can do almost anything. Most brilliant men I know, and they're part of another line of brilliant men. Okay. But I didn't grow up in that, and I wish I had. So it's, again, we're 1 degree of separation from those talents that we were told not to have, or told don't worry about that, get an education. And I think we should, again, try to find a way to live in both worlds, because at some point you buy a house, you'd love to kind of fix on it.
at least know they're charging you the right amount.
Right. At least what is fair.
Right. The guy comes to repair the roof and say, oh, this is going to be well, no, that's not the right price. No, that's
incorrect. I could contraire, good brother.
Au contraire. Well, let me ask you one more question, because you touched on it before I get out of here. You talked about you have encountered people, and as we all have in the community, that maybe went the wrong path earlier in life, but they turned the car around. They're now on the right path. And I think this is always a constant conversation we have in the Black community, because, you know, we always want to look around and see good representations of us. You know, I want to see my brothers and sisters doing well. Yeah. In your personal experience, especially in your experience as a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi, and let me add to this, I'm a firm believer that we already have models in place in this world. When we see problems, we have to tweak them. It's not necessarily that we have to come up with reinvent the wheel. So in your life experience, in your experience as a brother, what are some things that we can do when it comes to these young men that we have in our communities to kind of make sure their path more likely increases the chances of their path being straight and narrow?
Well, there's 2 pathways. I mean, there's obviously, as a fraternity, we have infrastructure to capture young people in Guy when they're younger, and in Kappa League when they're a little bit older, in high school age. And that is an incredible way to expose them to opportunity and to like-mindedness and to finding their path their footing from the earliest of ages throughout their pre-college years. So we have that infrastructure in Kappa Alpha Psi. And again, if you're not familiar, those types of things in that we expose them to almost everything that they need from the appropriate etiquette to have in an interview, to proper etiquette at a restaurant, to dressing for success, dressing for the thing you want to be, and why it's important, how to do it. All of those kinds of things come into it. So that's what the bond. But for individuals that are not in the fraternity or not part of a fraternity, you still have an incredibly important role that you can make on your community. And that is simply going back to those old elements that we saw, or you and I experienced when we were younger in the neighborhoods. You know, it was people telling you, oh, constantly lifting you up. Your neighbor is constantly saying, oh my goodness, you so smart. If you even got a C, you so smart, you can do anything.
Hercules.
You can do anything. And again, and the more you know about that, the first time you make a compliment, and maybe that's the thing, start to compliment children more, right? Yes. On the smallest things.
Yes.
Because when you compliment them, it opens the door for them to be more receptive to you. Mm-hmm. You know how that old adage of, praise out loud, critique in,
yes,
quiet.
In private, yes.
So when you open the door to start complimenting them, they're open to you. Mm-hmm. And then you can start correcting those things that can get them off path while also seeing them. Now, obviously, you can't do this to every kid you cross because you don't know every kid you cross, but there's something good you can say potentially of everyone if you're prepared for the moment. Gotcha. Saying things, doing things like that, crossing those little bit, those micro engagements can be the thing that can give promise to the young man that was thinking about quitting school, or thinking for a young girl that's not focused on class because she hasn't ate all day. Okay. The fact that you said, wow, you should celebrate the fact that you got that certificate, girl. That is beautiful in handwriting, right? Normally who's going to make a big deal of that? But you can. Mm-hmm. And she will work on handwriting. And if she can do good in handwriting, I can do good at spelling. And if I can do good at spelling, I can keep it moving, right?
That's right.
But so you don't have to be a part of anything. You just have to be a part of your society. Mm-hmm. And know what is the first thing I can say? What is the smallest thing I can do to be a blessing, a small gem for this person that's within my proximity.
It takes a village.
It takes a village. It always has. It has not changed, even with social media. Mm-hmm. You just have to be willing, because a lot of people, over the last 20 years, I'm scared of kids. I don't want to say nothing to nobody. And I understand, but I guarantee you, if you do say it, if you lead with something complimentary, they will hear you, as opposed to get out of here, y'all making too much noise.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned social media. I think that's the bad thing with social media. It puts out this message that, kids are not receptive to listening, but there's more kids out there that are hungry for, please give me some guidance. Please give me some direction, To
that point, I will say we have the most informed generation than maybe history. Yes. They're exposed to more information than a little bit. They know a lot, but with great information and just like responsibility, it's about cultivating what are you going to do with it? What needs to be culled from the shaft? What do you need to know, as opposed to what all you know? They know a lot, far more than I did at their age, respectively, right? But they need to be molded. Mm-hmm. They need to find their place. And as that might be the gift of social media or just on an online experience, the curse is the fact that they view their own prospects off of weighing each other on social media. How many likes did I get on this comment? And if I didn't get enough likes, maybe I'm not saying something of relevance. Now, that might have been, and when social media first came out, you and I both probably put long diatribes on something because, and you just felt great. And then all of a sudden we find out about this thing called a like or a not like. I'm like, well, I don't feel some kind of way. I've never thought about that, because we're used to growing up having a conversation with somebody that is nodding or disliking, or you get instant understanding. Correct. Social media creates a judgment that carries throughout their formative years that may be a false impression of who they truly are.
Yes.
But they live with that. And then they see false sense of beauty. They see false sense of intelligence. They go down wrong pathways of fact, which is, fake news and things of that. So it's a gift and a curse. So to that degree, I lean on the fact that they have to be molded with that great information they have. There is definitely a generation of brilliance within what they've been exposed to, but we do have to tell them how to use it. But we have to understand it too, which is why, again, classic media exists. A classic me exists to kind of help them with that.
Yeah. I was just having that conversation with somebody. I was like, when I was younger, the only people that had impact or say so on my perception of self were, people in my immediate community. To today's kids, they could have somebody in Bolivia give them a dislike or something, and like I feel terrible for the rest of the day. And that person is not in your community. It has no impact on your life whatsoever, but yet they can twist your head in just a whole different direction. It's a whole different world they live in. These kids live in today that, we have to understand, but at the same time, coming from our generation, we're like, why do you even care? It's kind of the segue in generations.
It is a segue in generation, but I'll say this, Sister Reid, when we think about George Floyd, and we think about what happened to George Floyd. Now, as horrific as what happened to George Floyd was, we know, the tribe knows, this is not the first time this has happened.
Not at all.
This is the first time it happened when the world was quiet, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Everybody's looking straight at social media all day long. So that's one. Two, the world through social media was highly super connected.
Yes.
Right? So the outrage that would normally be in a neighborhood for seeing it, or maybe the neighborhood or the city for reporting it in the news, was magnified because social media had it on constant blast and it was shared and it was magnified. So it was not even though it was yet another African-American tragedy, it became a global travesty.
Yes.
Because that kid from Bolivia, as you mentioned, that could influence my kid, also saw George Floyd.
Yes.
And they saw that in their neighborhood, discrimination. Because that's a universal, moral failing of many countries and cities. And that's why we saw the enormous amount of scaled protest on behalf of George Floyd. How did somebody in, Poland protest for George Floyd?
Yeah.
Social media. So again, it's a true gift and it's a true curse if it's not used properly. But I would say it's far more of a gift, and we have to just be better mentors of how to use its power.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw that. What did his daughter say? My daddy changed the world.
Her daddy did.
And as you said, this was a guy who had a couple of wrong turns in life.
100%, yeah.
But he ended up unfortunately impacting the world. There were protests in France and all over the world because of the injustice, so.
Yes.
Well, sir, we could talk for a while. But I can't take up. I can't take up your day. I'm gonna ask you my random question, and then I'm gonna ask you to let us know how we connect with you, because you've got some things going on yourself.
Okay.
Wouldn't expect anything less of a Kappa. Let's see what we've got here.
Oh, we have a shake-up bag. Okay.
Oh yeah, I got random questions.
All right.
I'm the old school.
All right, we got the Arthur Anderson quality assurance.
I grew up going to my grandmother's house and watching The Price is Right, and like old school. Turn the little bingo thing. Right? Okay. If you won $1 million, what would you buy first?
$1 million. What would I buy first? Probably. I don't know. I feel like at this point, an undesignated piece, probably at least a third, will be invested in people that have businesses that I know, like investing in people. Okay. Because investment in people is an investment that always returned. Okay. In that way, find the right ones. But yeah, $1 million would go toward people. Okay. Certainly to a lesser degree, things that would fortify my circle in terms of some of their passions.
Okay.
So maybe it pays for somebody's certification.
Truly a servant, truly a servant.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the business of leading is learning how to be an individual contributor at the highest level.
Okay.
Because individual contributors that contribute at the highest level are thrust into leadership inevitably,
Okay.
because of their service. It's a perfect circle. So it would be pushed out.
I like that. I like that. Well, sir, how do we connect with you and what you've got going on?
Humble little old Kevin Kimble.
Humble old.
Humble old Kevin Kimble. No, I mean, you can find me obviously on social media. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, but I do have a social media community called Classic Me. It is connecting some of the more traditional ways and means and traditions to some of the ways and means and traditions of today. And for many, that translates to learning a little bit more practically speaking about crypto, Bitcoin, learning a little bit about your transgender community and some of the things that you should use and how to address people to express their full selves, things of that nature, and a whole lot in between. How to get past yourself in achieving your goals. A lot of testimonies. We talked about social media and remote work. Probably, I had an interview about that about a year before I started it. But this gentleman had a business 10 years ago, James Butts. So yeah, find me and a growing community on Classic Me. It is a fee-based community. But it's $3.99. So it's just you're paying for something. As they say, if you're not paying for it, you're the product. So in this case, you're paying for it. So you're invited. You're a community member. You have vested in your privacy is your privacy.
Okay.
All right.
Classic Me, classic man, classic Kappa.
Your words to God's ears. It's been a pleasure, my sister.
It has truly, truly been a pleasure. I thank you so much for your time. I wish you and yours continued phenomenal success. I think I was roaming around being nosy. I saw your Facebook. You have a new member of the clan there, a little four-legged critter.
Yes, the incomparable and famous 𝗧𝗓.
Okay.
Yeah, she was going to be another K. Everyone in my house has a name with a K except my youngest daughter with a Z. And I said, let me defer from K and give it a Z name. So she has company. So we have five folks in the house with a K or a Z, but keeps us busy. She's a new baby.
Oh, new baby. Well, lots of treats to her, and she'll bring a lot of peace and joy to the family, I'm sure.
Don't say peace. Don't say peace. But joy, yes.
All righty, sir. I thank you again for your time. I'm just so humbled. I am just so humbled. You put this energy out into the world, and to have you gentlemen say, yes, we will sit down and talk to you, lady. We don't know who you are, but we will talk to you. I am just truly so humbled. So thank you so much. The privilege is ours, and much success to your podcast and your other endeavors. I think this was exceptional, and I appreciate being a part of it. In even a small way, you've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate the provocative questions. So again, peace and success, continuance to you, Sister Reid. Thank you very much. That is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.